Hello, it is Friday. My name is Laura Bradburn, and a little bit of a change of lineup today. I've got Brian Degnan with me. How you doing, Brian?
Very well, thanks. Very well.
You've picked some day to be here, I have to say.
It's
Have to
it's
say.
all it's all worked out well. I think Tony went into the wardrobe to find a pair of shoes and got lost. So I'm here to take his place. And what a day to be as a super sub on Acsom today.
What a day! We'll get into it. We're joined as always, or not as always, but as often on Fridays by Celtic by Numbers, Huddle Breakdown host and Celtic Way writer Alan Morrison. How you doing, Alan?
Yeah, very good. Good to see you, and happy days.
Happy days. Yeah, the transfer news everybody's been waiting for. Nir Beaton has a 2-year contract at Maccabi Tel Aviv.
Good for him.
Yes, good on you, Nero. But no, really, we are here to discuss the big news. Every week I've been on here, Brian, the comments have just been announced Jota, announced Jota, announced Jota. I don't know what I could have done about it, but the Celtic media team have done it for me. What was your reaction when you saw that tweet this morning?
Oh, I was. I think I would describe it as giddy. I think that's how I would describe myself this morning. I was over the moon. I had a feeling it was coming, but you always get that sort of anxiety when it takes that long. You get it's like almost PTSD about Eddie Howe, isn't it? It's been that long, you start to think something's going to go south. If you saw him in some sort of other strip, they'd have been devastated. But thankfully, the man himself arrived and spoke about his love for Celtic and seemed very genuine with it. And it's almost bigger than Jota, right? Because it proves now that January wasn't some sort of exception in how we're going about our transfer business now. I mean, it's 2 days into pre-season. We've got a backup keeper, a new left back, and signed probably two of our best players for last season permanently on long-term deals as well. So great business all around. It's just a brilliant day to be a Celtic fan. Most days are, but in particular today.
Well, I would say most days are, unless you discount 2 years, about a season ago or something like that. Apart from that, it's pretty good to be a Celtic fan. But yeah, Alan, just talking about what Brian's been mentioning there, any idea that we had that any of Ange's dealings in the transfer market were going to be a kind of one-off fire sale or a one-off panic buys in January and anything like that? Business like this with Jota seems to be proving the exact opposite, doesn't it?
It does. I'm going to be a little bit more cautious than Brian. The old maxim about giving a manager 3 transfer windows. I don't count last summer as being the first one because it was just chaotic. And if you look back at it actually, and the 2 loan deals for Carter Vickers and Jota and Giakoumakis signing were done on the last day. And we were all kind of like, who are these guys, kind of thing.
Yeah.
In retrospect, look brilliant. But we saw from the teams that we put out in the early days of the season that summer with Postecoglou coming in, etc., was a bit of a chaotic. I think we saw the first seeds of a new paradigm for how Celtic do business in January. I'd absolutely agree with that. And the signs this summer are hugely encouraging in terms of getting the business done early, getting the business done for players that clearly fit the style of play and meet the manager's specification, but I'm not yet announcing the death of Lowell Ball. I think I'll wait another transfer window, but I'm hopeful that we can in January formally, say our final farewells to the last vestiges of Lowell Ball.
Yeah, hopefully we can. Alan, I'll come back to you first on this before I go to Brian. We all know Jota's skill. We all know the excitement he brings. But from a stats point of view for you, as somebody who's invested in that side of things, how much of an impact does he actually make on that side of things as a player in the team? Because I think for somebody who watches the game from purely an emotional and eye test point of view, I know what Jota brings to me, but he's got to have that impact in other areas of the game as well. And how much does he have that for you?
Ow.
Sorry, I thought you said Brian.
Oh yeah.
We're live. Listen, so Jota's. I mean, he's a hugely talented player, and very exciting. Obviously, I just love the little video that Benfica put out to say goodbye to him, which I thought was a nice touch. If you haven't seen it, check it out. There's a wee Didi Jota running around, skirting past players and belting it into the top corner. It's lovely. Give that one a look out. Listen, when I talk about Jota, I always use the phrase he's a high volume player, and what I mean by that is for a winger and for a creative attacking player, he gets on the ball an awful lot, much more than those types of players generally do. And by some metrics, so for example, and I don't want to go down this rabbit hole too deep, but I'm just trying to paint a picture for you. So StatsBomb have got all these on-ball value metrics, which are kind of an attempt to distill players' values and contributions down to one metric. And he doesn't score that well by them. And I think the reason for that is because if you actually averaged out all of his actions, the average off them wouldn't be particularly high. But overall, the volume of chances that he creates, the volume of shots that he has, etc., is very, very high. And so, as I say, he's not super efficient, but he's just high volume. But where I think he's incredibly valuable for this Celtic team is the balance that he brings to the forward line, because not only in a literal sense, in that he can play on either side, but in a logical sense, in that if you compare him to the attributes of the other forward players, they're almost the opposite of what I've just described. Somebody like Kyogo especially hardly gets on the ball, hardly touches the ball, but when he does, he's incredibly efficient. Many of Maeda's strengths are actually off the ball. His pressing, his hounding of defenders, etc. On the ball, he doesn't do a lot that's particularly flashy or risky. He usually just keeps it simple unless he's in the box, and then he's a real threat. So having somebody like Jota playing with those two, for example, it creates a wonderful balance to the front line. And in terms of specifics, to give you the sort of flavour in the data for what Jota's like, there's only Turnbull that plays more passes into what we call the danger zone. So the danger zone being in front of the goal, with to the depth of the penalty box, and Turnbull's, a lot of his are from set play. So from open play, Jota provides more of those types of passes into that dangerous area than any player that I've captured data for. As I said, with high volume, he's also a high risk player. So I talk about high risk. What I mean is, he accepts that not every pass is going to be accurate. He'll take the risk. So an example of those types of players would be a Stuart Armstrong or a Ryan Christie, who can cause frustration because it seems like they give the ball away a lot, but it's because they're trying to do highly creative things that are very risky and often don't come off. And again, a good counterpoint would be James Forrest. James Forrest is a player who actually puts relatively little risk into the game, is actually quite careful with his passing and tends to create good quality chances because he'll only cross the ball if he thinks there's a good chance to be had of it. But you need a bit of both. And again, Jota brings that sort of risk and uncertainty. Having said that, he's on par with somebody like a Sinclair in terms of shots inside the box. And I would think of Sinclair as more of a second forward than an out-and-out winger. Only Turnbull and O'Reilly had more key passes from open play than Jota last season, and they're obviously playing central. I do an aggregated attacking metric, and only Forrest in his 1920 season, that was peak James Forrest, has had a higher kind of attacking threat score that I've recorded. So I could go on and on and on. But what you've got with Jota as a player, where it's high risk, high reward, right? He's good enough that he's a good decision maker in general. I mean, there are areas that he clearly can improve. His shot decision making is poor, and he can still improve in terms of his final pass decision making. Probably errs just a little bit too much on the risky side. We're talking about tiny margins here, but wonderful talent. Incredible that somebody as talented as him is at Celtic and for the long haul, and that he clearly is invested in being here as well. So yeah, great news.
Yeah, Brian, I'll come to you in a second, but I just wanted to pull up some of the comments coming in from everybody watching on YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, Facebook, wherever you're watching. See CJ Mick says, beautiful Friday, Jota on the wing. Sean McFadgen says, signing Carter Vickers and Jota, a big statement of intent, which I absolutely agree with. I was talking to Paul John before we came on air, and we were saying we would have been happy to get one of those. And that's and it's absolutely true that getting both of them is a bonus. So Magnet67 says, afternoon Acsom team delighted with Jota. A number 6, a striker and a centre half would be dreamland. Can't wait for it all to kick off. And this one, I'm just going to indulge myself a little bit. Stubbsy's Horse says, Acsom live for the first time in ages, Laura hosting and Jota signing, jackpot. I'll take that, Stubbsy. I'm more excited about Jota signing, but thank you very much anyway. Brian, Alan touched on it just at the end of what he was saying there. To get somebody like Jota, who obviously had such massive ties to Benfica, we saw that with the affection with which they said goodbye to him. It was, I'm sure, an emotional wrench for him to move away. How much does that tell you about the relationship he's built up with other players at the club, with the manager, with the fans, that he's willing to give all that up and come and play for us on a more permanent basis?
Yeah, I think it speaks volumes. I think it shows that there's a couple of ways you can look at it. Obviously, the carrot of Champions League football is going to be huge for a player as Jota's profile. I think if he can perform on that stage, the possibilities are endless for him. He's so young as well. He's 23. So it's a huge opportunity for him personally. So even if he's looking at just pragmatically, he's going to play Champions League football, so that's an incentive. But I think what you're looking at is, and you can see it in the type of character he seems to be, this is the culture that Ange's fostered at the club. He speaks so often about signing people, not players, which I think is kind of wonderful. I love that attitude, and you can see the players when they speak how sort of passionate they are and how invested they are, and you see in the clips they seem to get on really well and be quite close knit, and they all speak in glowing terms of not only the coaching staff but of Callum McGregor as well. And I just think that having that sort of, Ange's been very clear that he wants players who want to be there and are passionate about being there. And if you're not, he's not interested. You can move on. And I love that mentality. And I think that must be infectious for the players, because they're buying into this place that they're creating something special. And I mentioned before, like, intelligent, smart football players like playing with other intelligent, smart football players, and they like playing attacking football. They're coming to Celtic to play expansive football, be on the ball a lot, showcase their skills, and do it for a massive club with a sort of huge, passionate fan base. And that's incredibly attractive for a young player. Add into that, you've also got the fact that they're coached to such a high level. Now, if you look at the way Ange coaches, and that sort of high intensity, high press, high energy, superb levels of fitness, bravery on the ball, those are attributes that any of those players can apply to any big club in the world now. If you look at, the Manchester Cities of the world, your Borussia Dortmunds, etc., if they were to go to that level or even another club, they're so prepared to walk straight in now. So it's a huge training ground for them to come to Celtic. And the fact they said he loves it, which sort of pulls in the heartstrings, it's just amazing. I'm super excited about it today, as you can tell. I was just putting the finishing touches to my I love you Jota sign. I was putting my glitter on it before we I think it's the most excited I've been during a transfer window, because of complete faith in Ange Postecoglou and how he works within our transfer system.
Yeah, I think for everybody watching, I was talking to Brian just briefly before we came on air, and the only way I can describe it is like a 14-year-old in the front row at a Harry Styles concert. It was like, we're pretty excited here, I have to say. Just to come back to you on that, Brian, Alan was talking about some areas where he's a risky player. But I think with that, and I think what Alan was saying as well, not to put words in his mouth, was with risk comes reward occasionally. I'm thinking of the goal against Rangers, the goal against Aberdeen at Pittodrie. For you, Brian, is that element of player type as important for you as like a reliable player for Celtic?
Absolutely. I actually think it can be more important at times, because there's an unpredictability in that risk, isn't there? Because they'll just try something that maybe somebody else wouldn't have thought of. I immediately think of the pass for Kyogo. I think it's Ferenc Varos. Now, there's no many players going to come up with that and to be able to execute that pass. So yeah, you can have 10 outfield players that are very sort of reliable squad is, and going about their business and they're quietly efficient, but you need that sort of extra. That's why I'm also a huge fan of Matt O'Reilly for that. I just think he's got that sort of football intelligence that he just tries things that other people won't. And yeah, sometimes it may not come off, but that's all right because you've got the balance of the reliable players that can sort of support that creativity. And obviously Turnbull's another huge asset. He's a guy that I'm excited about next season. I was no critical, but I did question if he would fit Postecoglou's system because off the ball he's no the greatest presser. He doesn't have the natural legs to get about, but what he's contributed to Celtic last season, you know, even if you look at his stats over the course of the season, even though he only played half of it, it's quite incredible. So I think to have that option in the midfield is going to be really special next year as well.
Yeah, I think options is what we've always been crying out for, especially when we talked the number of times, especially in Neil Lennon's last couple of years, where we looked at the bench and thought we don't have options on the bench. That's certainly not going to be a problem for us this season coming forward. Alan, I wanted to ask you as well. I don't know if this is your personal opinion, Alan, but I always find, or usually find, loan signings being made permanent a bit underwhelming. They're not quite as exciting as a brand new signing. They're not quite as intriguing as a brand new signing for a number of reasons. But this one feels different to me just because we know the type of player we're getting. Do you think we've got a right in this instance to be as excited for the permanent signing of a loan player as we would be if he was somebody new coming in?
No, I think we do because even when he signed and it was the last day of the transfer window, and then as soon as I saw him play, I thought there's no way he's hanging around longer than a year. Just not going to happen. And honestly, I just thought, listen, let's enjoy the guy, and then we'll all kind of move on. There's not many where we've made that move. In fact, to my mind, in terms of first team players, Fraser Forster came on loan for a couple of years, and then we signed him. I can't think. I'm sure I'll be corrected very quickly, but I can't remember the last one that we actually signed permanently. We had El Yunusi for 2 years, but that was never looked lightly. So yeah, I was not thinking at all that we'd end up in this situation. And indeed, my understanding is that there's many at Benfica that are absolutely furious that this come to pass. And I'm surmising now that one of the reasons that this took so long, other than the fact that I think there's a bit of accountancy jiggery pokery around this falling into the new tax year in terms of a signing, I think there's a bit of that going on. It's probably because the Benfica board, to try and save a little bit of face, have been trying to eke out as much as they possibly could from this, because there's general bemusement within the club that Jota has been allowed to go. I'm totally shocked at the extent to which he seems to genuinely have fallen in love with the place. Because again, why would a kid from Portugal do that? And a guy of his talent, I'm sure he's not short of other possibilities of where he could go. So yeah, absolutely. The signs have been good all summer, to be honest. So this isn't a surprise, but it's a surprise from when I sat here last season. At the beginning of the season, and he'd signed on loan to me. And then when I first saw him, to me, I just thought, nah, no chance. We've got absolutely no chance, but let's enjoy him. So this is yeah, I feel this is great. And I think this is a real, to Brian's point, I think this is a real good sign in terms of Celtic being seen as a place where players of his talent and potential can come at a good fee, on a good salary, but still, with the potential to grow further into a bigger club. I don't know what his ceiling is. I suspect, if I'm being brutally honest, he just probably lacks that little bit of pace to be absolutely top tier in terms of, you top five, maybe in England, if you want to think of it that way. That might be being a little bit harsh. He's still got a bit of growth to do. But what he has got, which modern coaches love, is that fearlessness. He's absolutely fearless. He's brave on the ball. He wants to take the fullback on. If he gets hammered or he tries to take the fullback on and he gets beat for speed, it doesn't deter him. He'll try again. He'll try another trick. And modern coaches love that. They love difference makers in that final third. So I think he's got a chance to go on to a very, very good level.
Yeah, I've tried a few of those tricks after I get hammered as well. It doesn't work out quite as well. But Alan, just to come back to you on a point that you made there about El Yunusi and about some of the other loan signings, we have seen that was a I don't know whether it was a deliberate tactic or what it was, but we seem to have dealt in the loan market an awful lot the last few years. Having said what you said about Elyounoussi and things like that, do you see this as being a kind of change in the way that we are doing things? Are we going to go down the more permanent signing route after making these signings permanent, or do you think it'll be more loans or loans to buy? What's your opinion on the strategy going forward?
No, I think that strategy has persisted, and I think it's something we'll continue to do. So I don't think we've actually changed approach on that one. If you look back through, people like Benkovic and Burke and Weah and even Toyan and the list goes on, and players that we've brought in on that basis who are probably at clubs where they're thinking, can I break into, they're probably on decent contracts, quite young players, but on decent contracts. They're at big clubs that can afford, or clubs that can afford high salaries, not necessarily big clubs, compared to Celtic in that sense. But no, I think we'll continue to follow that model. I think it makes absolute sense for a club like Celtic. It kind of de-risks a lot of the issues around players settling in, getting to know the environment, getting to know the league, the try before you buy, if you like. So I think we'll continue with it. I think the big step forward this season is the relationship, especially Carter Vickers, the relationship that he formed with the manager was, I suspect, a huge factor in him deciding to continue to stay. And listen, as well, especially in England, there's a huge stockpiling of players that's taken place. And clubs like Chelsea, Man City, Tottenham, they see this as an opportunity to make money. They make money from the loan fees, and they make money from buying players who for 2 or 3 million and then selling them for 6 or 7 million. And you get 5 or 6 of those in a year. You've given yourself leeway to buy another first team player potentially. So, but what's changed is in the transfer market is there's changes to the rules around the number of players you can have out on loan in England that aren't homegrown. So this stockpiling of young foreign players, especially, I think is going to reduce. But what it does mean is that there's probably quite a bit of shift to be had in the market, and that's why potentially we're looking at the Japanese kid. Well, he's not a kid. The Japanese player Itakura from Man City, because they simply can't afford to have him out on loan again. He's 25. He's never going to go into the Manchester City first team. So I think there's lots of opportunities out there to pick up really good players from good clubs over the next couple of years as those teams recalibrate their squads to meet the new regulations. So I think as a market we'll continue to explore. What seems to be a difference maker now is we've got a manager who seems to be able to convince people and is incredibly charismatic and persuasive, and people believe in him and believe in what he's trying to do, and that's massive.
Yeah, I think like you say, that's a massive part of things, because with all due respect to the Scottish game, I don't think it's many players' dream to come and play in Scotland unless they know Celtic beforehand. So having a manager that can reinforce what's so special about this club and what you can achieve by playing here is vital. Brian, we'll move on slightly from the Jota conversation for a bit now. The strap says their Celtic summer spend hits nearly 18 million, but how many more do we need? We've got a second choice goalkeeper for Hart. We've got Carter Vickers in on a permanent deal. We've got Bernabe, who we'll talk about at left back, and we've got Jota. Where, Brian, for you are the next target areas? Where, if any, do you think we need to strengthen in the squad between now and the end of the season? I think end of the pre-season. I think one of the commenters said we've still got 8 weeks to make some more signings. What do you think we can do in that time?
I think in terms of what we need, we definitely need a first choice centre back to partner Carter Vickers. For all Starfelt's done well and they formed a good partnership, it's an uneven partnership, because if it's Starfelt and Welsh, you don't get the same results as Starfelt and Carter Vickers, right? So I think we need a really strong partner for Carter Vickers. And again, that's not having a go at Starfelt. Like, if you put me up front next to Ronaldo, we'll be a good strike partnership. But if Ronaldo starts playing, it'll be an awful partnership, because I'm rotten, right? I'm not saying Starfelt's that bad, but you do need a really strong left side centre back, especially for the Champions League. I think we need a really strong defensive midfielder as well. I like the sort of stats I've saw about Vinicius Souza. But I don't know if that's going to come in. I think if that comes in, it'll be a loan. I don't think it'll be a loan to buy.
I'd take Vinicius Junior though.
Well, that'd be all right. See if you fancy it up at East End. See Pine chips, you never know. And I think a lot of people are saying we need another striker. I would disagree. I think we need another winger because I think Maeda can come in if, God forbid, Giacomakis and Kyogo get injured. And I think Abada can play there as well if need be. You've also got Kenny and Dawson in the sort of B team.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas out wide, we've only got Maeda, Jota, Abada, Forrest. Johnson's not going to feature, so I'm not counting him. Maybe it'll be harsh, but I'm not going to count him moving forward. So I think we need reinforcements on the wing, and I think we need a as close to a Jota-like player as we can get, because if you look at the way Jota plays, he's the only winger we have at the club plays that way.
Mm-hmm.
Abada's almost a second striker at times. He sort of cuts in, he doesn't really dribble past people, it's not really his game. Maeda's all about the press. Forrest is a sort of clever, more tactical player. So I think we need another Jota-like player, and I think that would be enough. I don't see he's getting another 4 players, I think that's optimistic. I think it'll be another 3, so winger, centre, mid, centre back, and I think maybe at least 2 of them will be loans, with options to buy.
Yeah. Alan, what do you think of Brian's transfer market imaginary dealings there? Would you agree, or would you be in his ear as the assistant manager saying, no, I think we need to go down another route? What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'd love to make this better telly by completely rubbishing and disagreeing with everything that Brian said, but unfortunately I largely agree with everything that Brian said. I did write about this on Celtic by Numbers on the 24th of May. I did my piece on what I thought we needed, and if I go through my list there of my own little shopping list, I wanted a starting left back, or at least a challenging starting left back, so that's tick. I wanted 2 centre backs, and we've got 1. Carter Vickers, so that's half a tick. I wanted another box-to-box midfielder, but my caveat on that was, are we going to flog McGregor for another 60 games at 29 years old in that 6th position? Question mark. Do we think Idiguchi and McCarthy would be able to play 25 games? I'm pretty convinced on the former that isn't going to happen, and on the latter, I don't think it's going to happen either. He'll be seen as a squad player to bring off the bench and shore up tight games. So potential for a 6 potentially as well. And the other one that I called out was, as exactly as Brian said, really thinking about succession planning for James Forrest. And I completely agree with the logic of what you said in terms of probably more a player who's going to be like more Jota-like, that sort of high risk, high volume type of creative player that might be a bit frustrating on occasions, but puts a lot of danger into the game as opposed to a more sort of safer option. So I still think for sure there's going to be 2 more. There's absolutely definitely a centre back, and another central midfielder, whether it's a box-to-box 8 or a 6, I'm not sure. Whether there'll be loan to buys or buys, I'm not sure. I can't imagine we're going to net spend an awful lot more than what we have. And there's still a lot of squad pruning to be done between now and the end of August as well. So that will play a part.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think most people can see where we need to strengthen, and I think both of your points are valid in that sense. It's just a case of, thankfully, we're not doing things the way we've done it in the past, and we still have plenty of time to get more of those dealings in. I'm going to spring this one on you guys, and I know, Alan, in particular, you like to prepare, but this one's just come up in the comments an awful lot, and I just thought I would ask it. Ridiculizer says, delighted so far. Would love to see strength and height added to the centre half, 6 left back, and Jordan Larson would be the cherry on top of the cake. Brian, I'll come to you first. Jordan Larson, he's been in the papers an awful lot. It seems like whenever he's in the transfer market, he's linked with Celtic. Whether there's any more validity to the story or not, because he's a free agent after his contract at Spartak Moscow being torn up, essentially. Whether that brings any more validity to the story, he might come to Glasgow or not, I don't know. But Brian, what's your thoughts on it? just as a player individually, would you take him? And B, what do you think it means in terms of the pressure that might be on him because of the name on the back of the shirt?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. If you're sort of, whenever you play FIFA or Champ, you usually try and sign him, don't you? Just because with Larsson up front. Unfortunately, that's not how things work. And I think that, look, the cop-out answer is, if Ange thinks he's good enough and signs him, I'll be happy because I trust Ange. I don't know enough about the player other than he's Henrik's son. I would hate for him to come and flop or no play or no be happy or no. That would be horrible. It would be like Larsson coming back as a coach or something, and it'd be a nightmare. It's something that I kind of don't want. So the cop out on the fence answer is, if Ange thinks he's good enough, then he's good enough. I don't think we should be signing players kind of on sentiment. And I may be doing the guy a disservice. I've not seen enough of him to suggest if he's good or not, or good enough. I suppose the question would be, is he better than Kyogo and Giakoumakis? Is he going to fit into the system? And could he handle that pressure, as you say? So if you're asking me right now, I'd probably say no, just because there's a lot of unknowns about it. It would be great for the fans and get everybody up, but I think there's more risk with it. However, if Ange signs him, then I'll be cartwheeling down the street and high-fiving strangers because I can get a strip with Larsson in the back and is a 39-year-old. So, yeah, that's
listen, Brian, you can still do that. You can still do that.
I know. But I also want O'Reilly in back of one, and I want Jota in the back of one, and so there's a lot to get done there, and I'm not sure I could pull them off anymore, if I'm honest.
Yeah. Well, no comment on that. I mean, listen, I'm sitting here in a Celtic shirt, so who am I to criticise?
The problem is when you get to 39 and you start wearing the hoops, there's no as flat in it was when you're 21.
listen, just from experience, don't accidentally buy the match fit shirt because that's no good for anybody. Alan, I'll come to you on that one. The Jordan Larsson thing comes up pretty often. The romantic side of me says I would love to see him back to see what he could do. If you could guarantee me he would be a success, I would take him in a minute. And I have to say, I've seen enough of his scoring record to think that he might, bang in goals in Scotland. I have no doubt about that, and especially in an Ange side. But I think the reluctance that Brian talked about of what if it doesn't work, it really would be heartbreaking on a bigger scale than for most players, regardless of what we say about not dealing in emotion. What's your thoughts on the Jordan Larsson story? Does it have validity for you? Do you think it's an idea that or a road we should go down?
Yeah, I mean, it wouldn't surprise you to know, being sort of data-driven, fact-based, I've got really no kind of much time for this sort of sentiment-based decision-making. I'm wanting us to buy the best players that fit into the system and the manager's philosophy, of course. I don't even know if there's any genuine reason to think that Celtic are linked with him in any way, other than wishful thinking on behalf of people who are sentimental football fans, and we're all sentimental football fans, including me. I was only joking. However, having said all that, if you just look at him as a football player, and if you look at the data associated with him, he does have a certain attraction, and that is that he's actually a player who can play anywhere across the front three, and even can play as an attacking number 8. So that, to me, could solve a number of problems, or at least a couple of problems. At least it could solve the winger situation that we talked about, Brian, that Brian pulled up, and it could even solve the extra body at number 8, as well as additional coverage at striker. Though I agree with Brian, I've reassessed based on the evidence that I've seen with my eyes. I've reassessed my ranking of strikers to Kyogo, Giakoumakis, Maeda, and Abada. So I think we've got 4 players there that can all play that striking role really well. But anyway, depending on does the manager know him? Does he like him? Does he want to come to Celtic? Is he passionate to join the project? What's the money like? All those things. He's actually looks quite useful for a number of reasons. So that's my kind of take on it.
Oh, don't send me off dreaming here, Alan. I was expecting you to rubbish it straight off the bat. And now
well, I don't know if there's anything in it in reality, but I'm just saying. it's something that would be worth looking at, if only on the basis of him as a footballer.
Yeah, well, I'm going to be walking away from this show today with my face is going to be that wee heart eyes emoji after this, because I'm just going to be like dreaming of Larson and Kyogo up front. My goodness, right? But anyway, Red Scotland says he's like his dad and that he's ice cold. He wouldn't give two hoots about his dad's legacy, and as a supporter, nor would I. I think hopefully most Celtic supporters would treat him with the same way we would treat any other player, and judge him on his appearances and not put too much pressure on him to live up to the legacy of his dad, because let's be honest, I don't think anybody is going to do that for most Celtic supporters. Brian, I'll come back to you. I nearly called you the name of the commenter there, but there you go. I wanted to bring this one up, Brian.
I'm sure I've been called
Robert Heinlein says, after the discussions we've had, can't sign too many players, need to provide a pathway for youth players. Brian, what's your opinion on that? Do you think... I'm more of the opinion that youth players will come through regardless of signings if they're good enough. But I can see what the commenter means, in that if you keep piling in new signing after new signing, it is going to push those youth players who were thinking they were just breaking into the team down a peg or two. Do you think the way we're operating at the moment is getting in the way of some of those players making a breakthrough at Celtic?
I don't think at the moment, because I don't think there's anyone good enough to come through and step into the squad, if I'm honest. And that seems very harsh, and I've been sort of a bit of a grump about the academy, because I don't think there's enough there. So people are saying, we should be looking to bring players through, and we should, but that's not going to be this season, and it's probably not going to be next. I think where what's really positive though is the fact that Angie's restructured and put McManus down, and they've tried to make sure that the youth players that are coming into the club are as fit, as fast, as strong, and as technically aware as the players in the first team, so that eventually they will come through. And I think longer term that will be Celtic strategy. Is since if we sign a bunch of 16-year-olds just now, then by the time they're 19, they should, in theory, be able to come in. But I just don't think, other than you may get. So I've been harping on about Dane Murray. I'm a big fan of his. I think he's a player with a lot of potential. You may think that, say we sign a centre half to partner Carter Vickers, then you've got Welsh and Starfelt as cover for those two. You do need a fifth centre back option in case of injury. So that could be the case, that he keeps maybe Dane Murray or Boston Lowell as options there. Optimistically, you can maybe see Rudy Vata coming in, maybe just to help out in the wing on occasion. But I think, if we're really honest, I think that there's no one there desperately saying, why are they not getting a chance? And that's the problem, more than the actual philosophy behind it, if that makes sense. So I don't think he actually said, I think, one of his first press conferences, he wants academy players running through and he sees that as the future. I just don't think there's enough there to come in and impact the team at the moment. So I do agree with the commentator in theory that if you keep becoming a club that's always signing new players, then why would you even bother having a youth system? It has been a bugbear for a long time, but it's also been a problem for a long time that no one to fix for a long time. So I don't think it applies now, but I think probably in the future it'd be the case.
Yeah, Alan, Brian brings up a few good points there. Some of the Celtic B team players that we've talked about that you maybe thought, Boston Lowell, who captained the team pretty successfully last season, as a particular option. We saw when Ange first came in, players like Leo Held and Dane Murray looking and Owen Moffat was another one, looking as though they would break through into the team, only for us to make signings and for those names to disappear off the team sheet. What do you think of that question from the commenter about standing in the way of youth players and the signing policy being a hindrance rather than a help in that way?
Again, sorry to disappoint, in the sense that what Brian said made absolute sense, right? So there's two main problems. One is that structurally there isn't a credible pathway for any youth player from youth football to first team football in Scotland. I'm not saying that the reserve league is the perfect answer, but there isn't that pathway. So what happened? The Lowland League, which I think is generally a good thing, but for Celtic, that's capped at players that I think are 20 and under at a certain date in time. So for those players that are sort of 20, 21, 22 are either got to be challenging for the first team, or what are you going to do with them? And the second problem, which I think Brian covered very tactfully, is that the academy, if not broken, certainly wasn't functioning effectively. And I think this wasn't on his top 5 priority list over the last season, but it's now it's rising up the priority list a little bit, and as there's changes there at the top which reflect that. But as Brian rightly says, it's going to take many years for that to come to fruition in terms of improving the recruitment and then fixing a model to bring players through in terms of, they play for the Lowland team. We mentioned Vata. I mean, he's only 17. He's just a kid. Unrealistic to expect him to be in the first team. But then where do they go? Do they go out? Is there like a loan program? Is there a kind of child club relationships that we build to give these guys an outlet and an exposure to first team, more like first team football? So the system's broken, and Celtic have got to somehow find a way to work within that. And Celtic's own academy system is not functioning well, and they've got to fix that. Those things all take time, because if you look at the cadre of players that are around about that 20 to 22 age group, Welsh is already in the first team. Coffey, I don't, we no evidence that he's going to, be first team material. Uragidi 21, Shaw 21, Robertson 20, Abada's only 20. He's clearly first team. Moffat's 20, Wiley's 20, and then Montgomery's out on loan. And then you mentioned Murray, he's 19. Those are the ones who are of the age that they're probably getting too old for the B team. But where do they go? And of those, there's only a couple are already established first team. The rest of them, you either move them on, unfortunately. So yeah, I think it's a tricky one, and it's going to take a while for us to come up with a more coherent and steady stream through that production line.
Hopefully it's something that happens, but certainly not something we're going to solve today. So saying that, we will move on. We'll talk about our new signing, Bernabe from Argentina. Interestingly enough, I read somewhere that he's the first Argentinian player we've ever had in the Celtic first team. I had no idea that was the case. It kind of surprised me, but it's an interesting fact nonetheless. But we will come to him to round out the show. Alan, I'll come back to you on this one first, though. It's the great Enrico Annoni's birthday today. I don't know exactly his age, but happy birthday, Enrico, if you happen to be watching.
He's a bit older than me.
Right, okay, well, fair enough, Enrico. If you want to challenge that, then get in the comments and tell us. Lawrence, a contributor, assures us all he's best pals with Enrico. I'll take him at his word, and say that I would love to be pals with Enrico as well. I've met him once in a car park in East Kilbride going into a pub. I don't know what that says about either of us, but there you go. Alan, I wanted to get your thoughts on this first, because obviously you focus on stats. You talk about, even though we are all emotional football supporters, that you like to put that to one side when you're assessing a player. Enrico Annoni is exactly the opposite of whatever that is for Celtic supporters. He's the epitome of a cult hero. And so I wanted to get your thoughts specifically on what for you makes a cult hero, either in general or as a Celtic supporter. Why is Enrico so fondly remembered, even though he maybe wasn't one of the most gifted players ever to put on a Celtic shirt?
Yeah, I think there's an element of glamour, right? Italian player comes in. He came from Roma. He'd got to a UEFA Cup final with Torino, and although he wasn't like an international or anything like that, even in those days, 20 odd years ago, you still thought, wow, we're getting an Italian defender. I mean, an Italian defender, he must be brilliant because he's Italian and he's a defender. What could possibly go wrong? So you've got this kind of glamour around him. And then, of course, the reality, which is, he was a kind of, not, I wouldn't say a journeyman Italian player, that's too harsh, probably, but he had a decent career. But he probably, he probably wasn't. Certainly in my mind, I thought we were going to get Maldini or something, and then just remember thinking, oh, but actually, what you did get was just this kind of slightly mad, all action kind of player. And the other aspect of it is, but you love a player that plays on the left. I think left-footed players are just a little bit more eccentric by nature. I'm just gonna, so I'm sure I'll get some abuse for that one. So yeah, I think
players always have you always hear about a wand of a left foot. You never hear about a wand of a right foot.
No, and I don't think Anoni knew one end of a one from the other, but he certainly left his mark on a few. I mean, I always remember, the absolutely disgraceful way that he was treated by Hugh Dallas in a couple of games. I mean, it was cheating. I'm just not having it. It is anything else, right? And of course the guy couldn't help himself. He was passionate. He was so committed and so passionate. He just couldn't help himself in terms of his reactions and his response to that. So yeah, great, very, very funny in some respects. Kind of guy, memorable part of Celtic history. And as I say, Italian defender. What can go wrong?
Yeah, Lawrence is coming in to burst our bubble here. He says he spoke with Enrico today, and it's not his birthday. His birthday is the 10th. I'm going to challenge that because it says the 10th on Wikipedia, but Celtic Wiki says the 1st of July. So I'm going with the Celtic Wiki, guys. But if anybody wants to clarify that, Enrico, if you want to come on your actual birthday, if it is the 10th, come on Acsom and prove us wrong, then you're welcome to do so. Brian, Alan touched on an interesting point there about Enrico Annoni and how he captured the imagination of Celtic supporters. I know as a kid, the idea that we were signing an Italian player from Roma was like unbelievably glamorous to me. And I think that set him off in good stead to be a hero amongst the Celtic support even before he had set foot on the pitch. What memories, if any of you, do you have of him, and what are your thoughts on like what we talked about him being a cult hero for Celtic? Why do you think that's happened in his specific case?
Well, I think it's the thing that stands out was that he was the sort of player that Celtic were needing at the time, because Tommy Burns were very attacking, very free thrown, but they were looking for a bit of steel at the back, and only sort of fitted the bill. And as Alan said, he was never going to win any awards for his superb technical ability, but he quite easily put Brian Laudrup in his place, I recall, and he was part of a team that stopped 10 in a row. So for that alone, and as well, and it's funny, I think there's parallels actually with sort of Celtic at the moment in terms of the culture, because when Tommy Burns had that attacking flair and stuff like that, and obviously when Janssen came in later, but you look at how passionate Annoni was. He's a passionate player, and you could tell he sort of got it and he get involved, and I think that's infectious for people as well. I think we saw it, not to harp back, but also a couple of seasons ago when things weren't going well and the players looked really disinterested. Nobody really looked up for the fight, and I think that's something that Celtic fans in particular find hard to stomach. So even sometimes when you've got a guy like Annoni who he's never going to win the Ballon d'Or, but he had such passion and sort of heart in his sleeve, and you sort of admire those qualities in him, and I think there's an element of that in the Postecoglou's team, and that although a lot of them are very talented, they've also got that sort of passion and sort of bravery and determination, and it's something that I think that you mentioned it, Laura, about having heroes and stuff, and I just think this current squad, there's so many players that are going to become kind of iconic. I think, there's such a connection to some of these players already. I mean, Kyogo, he's got hero status after a season, and everyone's going to remember the lob against Hibs. There's certain players in this team, more than there has been for a long time, that are going to be these iconic sort of heroic figures. And I know he wasn't quite that, but I think the reason he's such fond memories is because of that passion and that sort of dedication. Sometimes it should be a prerequisite, but it isn't always the case. And I think that's just something we always yearn for in a player.
Yeah, I'm totally in agreement that I think he can develop hero status very quickly, especially after just a season. I mean, I know he's not a hugely popular figure amongst some of the Celtic support because of the way he left, but one of my first Celtic heroes was George Cadet, and he was only with us for just short of a full season when you count the end of the season when he eventually came into the club, and then when he left the next year. A short but strong impact for me as a Celtic supporter growing up, and I'm sure that will be the same for, like you say, a lot of Celtic supporters of a young age. With the lineup we have now, and the good thing as well is we've got a plethora of people you could choose from. There'll be kids who Joe Hart will be their hero, kids who Jota will be their hero, Kyogo, Yakimakis, Abada. There's loads to choose from, and that's the type of Celtic squad we want. Matt O'Reilly, obviously, yep, forgot about him. David Turnbull,
Matt
yep,
O'Reilly.
all there. Callum McGregor. I could just go through the whole squad, basically.
You talk about kids having these pictures in these heroes. Me and Al have got a Matt O'Reilly signed picture of my love.
Yes.
It's not just kids that fall in love with me. It's
you mentioned these little heart emojis you were talking about earlier, sitting there with all like fluttering eyelashes. You know.
I just like Matt O'Reilly.
I tell you what, Brian, you finish the JOTA sign you were working on. Alan, you do the Matt O'Reilly one, and we'll be sorted. But yeah,
podcast.
But to close out the show, now I've been reliably informed by the commenters that I'm pronouncing the player's name wrong. We'll see as the season goes on. I'm sure it'll change a number of times. But we've signed Argentinian left back Bernabe. He's come into the club. It's confirmed. Alan, I'll come to you first on this one. A left back is something we all identified, something we wanted, with all respect to Greg Taylor, who's served us very well since he came into the club. I think there was an appreciation that at the very least he needed competition in that area of the field, if not somebody to come in and step things up for us going into Europe. What do you know of the new signing, if anything? What have you managed to see about him or gather in terms of statistics? What do you think he's going to offer for us going into the new season?
Well, first of all, he's his signing is a bit of a throwback to the way that we played the transfer market, have done in the past with the likes of Van Dijk and Wanyama, where we've identified a player at a certain age, 21 I think he is, so early 20s at most, who's probably he's played less than 75 matches in his professional career, and which is just enough not to get on the radar of, in a big sense. He's just about. He's not a big club. Lanús aren't one of the top clubs in Argentina, and he's not played quite enough games to really sort of catch the attention. So we've kind of caught him in a bit of a sweet spot there, which is becoming harder and harder to do in the global market because of the globalization of football, the absolute, I use the word plethora again. I think it's the third time we've had that on the pod today, of stats and video that's available. The scouting capabilities of teams now is truly global. So there's very few secrets left in the world. But what I'm really, really excited about is that once again, this looks like a player who's been signed, who is absolutely coherent to the way that the team wants to play. This kid is going to be really, really exciting. Now, there's going to be a lot of rough edges. Okay, he's almost the anti-Greg Taylor in the sense that he's got the strengths and weaknesses the other way around. He's not a strong defender. He is a bit rash. But on the other hand, in the context of certainly domestic Scottish football, this is a guy that's going to be quite thrilling to watch, just for the sheer pace of him, but also the positions that he's going to take up. And what will surprise people is the number of positions he'll take up inside the play. So in terms of that, we talk about the inverted fullback role. He's absolutely born to play that role. His left foot is incredibly skillful. His range of passing is good. He's creative with it as well. The surprising thing that I think will surprise people was the number of times he pops up in the box or pops up in central occasions to create that overload and to support the front line even. So I think it's going to be hugely exciting. There's going to be risks there in terms of, as I've said, defensively. His numbers are not particularly impressive, and one-to-ones he's not particularly impressive. We've seen that he's got disciplinary risk there, and although he's got fantastic pace, which is Taylor's big downfall is, and especially in a recovery situation, he's expected to attack a lot as a fullback for Celtic. he doesn't have the pace to recover. This kid does have recovery pace, but he will be forward a lot, and he will be forward in quite unusual situations. So can he get back? Has he got the discipline to also get back the other way as well? We shall see. But he's 21, and as I say, he's going to be tremendous fun.
Yeah, certainly don't know a lot about him myself, but hearing that is really, really exciting to hear. And I think Brian touched on it earlier, like any signing that Ange sees fit to make, I'm willing to bet will be a success. Juan Douglas says, Laura, a few English teams were aware of him. It was being said on the radio that English scouts had been watching him a lot longer than Celtic, but that we acted first. Change days indeed. Brian, encouraging that as well, I think, from a supporter's point of view, that we identified an area of weakness that we needed sorted, and that the manager's seen it as well. So often we identify areas of weakness that never seem touched. Based on what Alan said, and based on that fact as well, that he seems to have identified a clear area of weakness in the squad and hopefully sorted it. What are your thoughts on the new player coming in and how it says about what we're going to do in the season going forward?
Well, first of all, Laura, I don't want you to feel bad about getting his name wrong. I said Rudy Vata earlier on instead of Rocco Vata. So,
at least I get the right person.
So I might just call him Malky based on his last disciplinary issue. Listen, I think it's incredibly exciting because, as you say, they stood even without knowing Alan's take on it, which is usually spot on. It was the fact that we needed a left back and you trust Ange to sign players. So that in itself, you kind of think, right, this is going to be exciting. Also, though, one of the things that I think is really important, as well as the new signings, is I think Greg Taylor's attitude's really good. I think like Ralston, I think he's a good footballer, right? But he's not a great player, but he can play great on occasion because he's trying his best. And I think having that competition, because Greg Taylor's not stupid, he's going to know he's going to be second choice now, really. I think he'll fight for that, and that competition is exactly what the squad needs. And the other thing as well is, if you look at last season, we played really well, played some really good football, had great success, but that group of players, were together for a very short space of time. They didn't have a pre-season. They're all going to be better this year. So even without new signings, the squad was always going to improve. They're always going to be sharper, fitter, stronger, and more adept at that system. And if you look at the improvement he made in a guy like Tony Ralston or like a Greg Taylor, the coaching's going to definitely improve these players anyway. So you're getting a squad that won double last year in style. They're going to be better. Plus, you're getting these additions in. I think it's incredibly exciting sign to be a Celtic fan under Ange. And one of the other things that I think, and I don't know if Alan will agree with this, but I think like in terms of the players we're identifying, if you look at the previous strategy of signing these players from sort of little known leagues for a short amount of money and try and sell them on, I don't think that's changed much. It's just that Ange is working very well within that system. So instead of just taking a punt on a player that happens to be a good player, he's saying, right, is this player going to fit the system? And it seems a simple fix, but he's working within that system to great effect. So it's keeping Celtic's risk model fairly, because they're quite a risk-averse business. He's keeping that kind of in line to balance the books, but doing it his way. And I think that's incredibly clever business. And to be fair as well, credit has to go to Michael Nicholson, because the way we've went about our business seems quite sharp. Signing Jota in a 5-year deal is great business, long term. It really is. As Al said, he may not be a player that stays with us too much longer, especially if he has a great season in the Champions League. But if you get a 5-year deal, you're going to get a lot of compensation for that. So these things are all hugely positive. And it's really hard to find something to complain about. I'm sure I will. I'll work on it and I'll come back. But at the moment, it's incredibly positive timing, and I can't wait. I don't think I've been this excited or this energised during a transfer window in pre-season for a lot of years.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think we're all counting down the days to Celtic coming back. We're going to end things a little bit sharp today because I got a last minute notice that I have to be somewhere very exciting. I don't want to say where in case I don't get anything content wise for the channel, but hopefully I'll be able to provide some some good content for the channel going forward. It might have something to do with the big news that has broken today, but there's no more I can say about that. I just need to take a fan with me, I think, guys, is all I'm going to say about it. I just need to fan myself down. Alan, Brian, it's been interesting to sit here and watch the love-in between you guys. I hope it continues. Thank you very much for joining me today. It's been a great one. Thanks to everybody in the comments for watching. Keep liking and subscribing to Acsom. We've got plenty more content where this has come from. Brian, Alan, thanks very much.